If you ask me what I think the most meta-suited top-tier jet in the game right now is, I would point you to the F-15C. The 8 AMRAM loadout, or the AMRAM AIM-9M combination, also having 19km HMD, an extremely good radar, all-you-can-eat countermeasures, and a flight model that very well suits 16 versus 16 top tier. It's just an all-around fantastic plane to play, well as it can be at this battle rating. But if you told me that you think that the most meta plane right now in top tier is the Mirage 2000, I couldn't really disagree with you. I wouldn't tell you you're wrong. This is definitely my number 2 pick right now. I would argue a plane like the J10 is probably even more well-rounded than the Mirage 2000, so if you need a more well-rounded plane, sure, maybe the J10 is your number 2 pick. But I think if you get the Mirage 2000's playstyle down to a T, unlike me, you can probably see a lot of success in this plane, and I'm going to do my best to show you guys exactly the way I think the Mirage 2000 is most effectively used in today's top tier. There are a lot of pros with this plane and not many cons at all. You get a great flight model, one of the best dogfighters for top tier ARB, probably top 4. Top 3 if you're not going to count the S16A Block 10 as a top tier, which many of you maybe wouldn't because you never really see them at this battle rating. You get over 100 countermeasures, 112 I believe, many of which are large caliber countermeasures, which is great. And while it's not quite all you can eat countermeasures like on the F-15 or the Gripen, it's still enough. It's just over the amount of being comfortable in my opinion. Something like an Su-27, I find myself I wish I had just a little bit more, but I think the Mirage 2000 is pretty much right on that mark to where I'm pretty confident I will never run out of countermeasures. The RWR works pretty much just as well as all the other RWRs at 13.7, so really no complaints there. And one of my favorite parts about the Mirage, which might be a downside to some of you guys, is the missile kit. If you remember last video when we were talking about the way top tier fights just go anymore and what they devolve into if you have 2 players that are actually competent when it comes to using these Fox 3 missiles, you pretty much end up in an off-bore sight HMD slinging Fox 3 contest. The only way to really reliably and consistently defeat active radar homing missiles every single time without fail is going to be 90 degrees and chaffing. You can't reliably multipath anymore. Sure it works well enough to where you will probably want to do it sometimes and feel comfortable doing so, but it's not something that will always work. There's just no way you can predict the splash damage on some of these missiles. And so when it comes to this off-bore sight, HMD slinging, go defensive, 90 degree chaff, recommit, HMD lock, shoot it again type fighting, the MICA missiles on the Mirage 2000 are honestly the most suited in the entire game. And while the radar leaves a little bit to be desired, I think compared to something like an F-15 or an F-16, it doesn't really matter because you're not using the radar for long-range BVR type shooting. You're pretty much only going to be using your HMD and 19km manual locks because the MICA missile doesn't have that much range anyways, not something like an AMRAM. So if something launches at you from that 30-40 kilometer range, there's no point in even shooting back. You may as well just start defending, notch and chaff, wait for them to get closer, and then do an off-bore sight HMD lock, shoot that MICA off, and then get 90 degrees and chaff again as quickly as possible. And this is a strategy that does actually work. And like we saw last video, other planes can absolutely do this too. You saw me doing it in the F-15. The point is that the Mirage 2000 definitely does this best, and in this type of fight, you're inevitably going to end up at pretty close ranges by the time it's all said and done, and ultimately, timing is going to be the biggest factor of who wins or loses, unless you're in the Mirage 2000, because once you get in really close range, you can just make it extremely easy to get that lock in, not have to lead your missile pretty much at all. I mean, look at this shot right here. I wasn't anywhere near looking at that guy or have my nose pointed at him whatsoever. 5 kilometers, and sure, maybe another missile could have done that just because of the fact he went cold, but had he not even went cold, that MICA would have still found its target. And it's shots like that and it's situations like that that I think make the Mirage 2000 extremely competitive and makes it probably the easiest top tier in the game to not die in. I mean, once again, right here we have a 2 kilometer, less than 2 kilometer HMD lock, MICA missile, no problem. It makes short work of him. We black out, narrowly avoid the mountain here, but you just can't do that in any other top tier. And there is absolutely practical situations where you need to do stuff like that. So having the Mirage 2000 for those types of situations is awesome. You get 6 of these MICA missiles, and that's pretty much the benchmark of what I would consider an acceptable amount of active radar homing missiles at this battle rate. And if you have anything less than that, like say the Gripen, I do think you're coming to the fight a little bit undergunned. But at 6, I think that's something I would consider normal, preferably though 8 or more, like on the F-15 and the Su-27. But not a big deal. As long as it has 6, I find that rather competitive. You also still get 2 Magic 2 missiles as backup, and these are probably the best gate width IRCCM missiles you can have. The R-73, the Magic 2, and the PL-5E2 all have the same level of IRCCM flare resistance to their gate width, but the Magic 2 being the fastest out of all of them, I think, maybe the PL-5E2 is also pretty much just as fast. Regardless, the speed of the Magic 2 makes it more flare resistant in a way over the R-73 because closing the distance is a big deal for gate width IRCCM missiles. The closer they are to the target, the harder it's going to be to flare them. And so having the acceleration to close the distance as quickly as possible is going to help your flare resistance. The PL-5E2, very similar situation, but the Magic 2 just pulls harder and they have very similar range nonetheless, so I prefer the Magic 2s. And again, you guys are seeing me employ this strategy of off-bore sight HMD MICA, go into immediate defensive mode and chaff their incoming missiles. I pretty much always trash theirs and they end up eating the MICA, and that's just the way of the world here at top tier when you're in the Mirage 2000. Little reversal on this F-15 here. Unfortunately, I underestimate the amount of damage I did, so I think he's pretty much out of the fight, but he's not. He HMD'd some more missiles at me that I have to defend from, and I have to focus more time and energy on this guy that I had thought I'd pretty much killed at this point, and it's ultimately going to leave me blind to the fact somebody's shooting me from behind, and I just get overwhelmed with the amount of missiles. I don't even know what ultimately kills me here. This may have been IR, I'm not really sure. A little bit of tunnel vision there on my part though, being kind of astounded of the fact that that F-15 was still alive. Ultimately cost me the game, and it's a shame because that was a 6-kill game. You don't really see that many high kill games at top tier anymore, just the nature of this Fox 3 combat. So I was a little frustrated with that, but I'll just have to cope and we'll move on to the next match here. Starting off the bat with a nice little MICA shot onto somebody low altitude. As I said in the last video, the early game shots I prefer to find people at low altitude for. I find that they just have the highest probability of actually hitting the target. Very often, the people hugging the deck in the beginning of the match tend to not really pay much attention to the missiles coming from above them for some reason, or maybe they have a false sense of security with their multipathing, and even if they think they're safe, there's a decent chance your missile's still going to splash damage them anyways once it hits the ground. And so, especially at far ranges, I don't really recommend those really early game launches. It's probably better to hold on to your missiles for when the match develops a little more. If you are going to partake, I do too, it's just fun. If you're going to do that, I recommend shooting people low altitude. As soon as I chaff this incoming AMRAM, or at least figure out that it's not coming after me anymore, or maybe it never was, I'm going to go ahead and try to pull an HMD shot on the F-16. Not going to be quite fast enough though, so we just go right back into chaffing, let him kind of fly by. He's not really a threat anymore, I just kind of have to get around him at this point, but he just ends up crashing into the ground anyway. If you do find yourself in a situation in the Mirage 2000 where you're simply outranged by AMRAMs, and this will happen, and it will happen rather often, F-15s, F-16s, they're going to get the first shots on you, and you may as well honestly probably not even shoot your MICAs back. Sure, sometimes it's nice to force them defensive even if you know your missile's probably not going to hit, but in the case of the MICA, it's just that outranged by the AMRAM, you may as well just forget about it. Fly 90 degrees, notch all the incoming missiles, let them get closer, and you will have plenty of time to off-bore sight them and then go right back into your chaff once they are within range. Specifically going to be helpful for those end of the game scenarios, those late game situations. There's not too many people left, but they know exactly where you are, you know where they are. They shoot from far range. Even if you inevitably merge in those situations, that's okay because you're in Mirage 2000. You will probably win that merge. Speaking of late game situations, I have 2 targets right here on TWS. I have MICAs off on both of them now, and I just go right into that 90-degree notch and chaff. Trash all of these incoming missiles, and then whatever a guy I don't kill here, I'm just going to recommit with an off-bore sight HMD lock. Once again, he's focused on my teammates anyways at this point, so I can kind of fully commit to him and not really have any worries. Don't get the kill for it. I actually kind of get confused with the orientation of his plane and the velocity of his plane. I think he's a lot more stalled out than he is, and he actually ends up almost killing me here with his guns as our missiles both collide into each other. I'm lucky that he missed. Very well could have ended in tragedy. Simple misread on my part, kind of puts me in a dangerous situation. I would have ended up getting the kill here anyways, just because he's pretty much stalling out, but my teammate has it under control. That's a wrap. Hope you guys enjoyed the Mirage 2000. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'll see ya.